question. All right.
Tzili, hi.
Welcome.
Welcome, everybody. And we are welcoming today, somebody which actually I'm his groupie, you might say. Harry Weiner. I got to know him because he came to a Tisch School of the Arts, undergraduate film and television at NYU to teach, and he became one of the major figure in the department. So Harry is a writer, director, producer of television and film motion pictures, right? And of course, a professor. So I would like just to enlighten Tzili, if you can give us the best or something that's really close to you, the shows that you were involved, both TV and feature films.
Okay. So first of all, thank you. It's such a delight to be with you too. And any information that I can provide that facilitates any kind of progress towards what you want to communicate with your audience, please guide me in the right direction. So in terms of my credits, I'll tell you the ones that touch me the most, because when I first got involved in film, and given everything that's going on in the world today, I got involved in film inspired by the events in the 60s and felt that film, I was at the Chicago convention, the Democratic convention, and saw people dancing to Happy Days or Here Again on the television screens around the convention center, and then saw it cut to the students that were protesting in the parks and the police coming in. And so I left the convention hall and joined the students. And at that time, I was hoping— It
was for Vietnam, against Vietnam War?
Against the Vietnam War.
Okay.
And it was, at that time, I wanted to be an attorney and go into politics. And that pivotal moment showed me the nature of politics. And I started thinking over the next few years about the power of mass media. And I felt that I could do more through telling stories in the mass media to make the world a slightly better place than I could through the political process. Little did I know, I was naive, but I gave it a shot. And so some of the films that I love are ones that are about something substantive. There was a movie I did with Laura Dern called Damaged Care that was about the healthcare system. There was a movie I did called Riot about the Los Angeles riots in the 90s, but it was inspired by the fact that I come from Detroit, Michigan. And I grew up where there were the Detroit riots in the 60s that impacted our family and our community in a significant way. And it left an indelible impression, and the movie Riot was a means of me processing that. And then there was a movie that I did called Jeremiah about the last prophet of the Old Testament. And that was one of the most glorious experiences I had because I've always been interested in spiritual matters. I grew up in a traditional Jewish, closely knit community, and would always prod my rabbis and tutors that my parents would get for me with questions that they couldn't answer. So cut to years later when I'm making this movie, and the movie was part of a series of films inspired by the Bible, Old and New Testament, that was being done by a Italian company that had the blessing of the Pope. And as a consequence, this series that had the blessing of the Pope, they had an ecumenical committee of religious scholars and historical scholars about various religions that included Judaism, Catholicism, various types of Christianity, and Islam. And I could go and ask this scholarly group any question I had about any aspect, any aspect of the story that I was telling, or any other aspects of the evolution of religion. And I was able to have that inform a lot of the decisions that we made in terms of making the movie. But that was a particularly gratifying one. And then on the total other end of the spectrum, one of the things I learned when you're making a movie for a mass audience is that they certainly don't want to be preached to, and that sometimes just pure entertainment is enough to sort of provide an escape from the challenges of everyday life. And I made a movie called Space Camp years ago, that was about some kids who went to a place in Huntsville, Alabama called Space Camp, where they learned to be astronauts. And they have the thrill of being placed on a space shuttle just for a test of the engines, and it takes off accidentally, and they have to actually
So it's
find.
all well narrative fiction?
It's a narrative fiction, yeah,
Ah, okay.
yeah. And
Harry, what movie would you have done today based
ooh,
on everything that is going on now? How would you present it?
well, if I had a quick answer for that, I'd be lying. It would take a great deal of thought because, as always, this is a very complicated time, very complicated issues. There's been horrors perpetrated on both sides, I have to say, in my own estimation. And, it's sort of like I did with the movie Riot. You want to take people into the lives of those who are impacted. That's what gives you the greatest uh, uh, um, uh, sense of the magnitude of these events. It's at a very small personal level that the greatest sense of the tragedy will be dramatized, can be dramatized. So whether or not, you did two concurrent stories about somebody in a kibbutz in the south of Israel, on the day, them going through their routine, and on the day that the horrors unfolded and were perpetrated, and then the hostages were taken or the deaths were, um, you know, generated. And then uh, uh, a story of somebody in Gaza, as the events unfolded, um, where they're trying to protect their family, and the Israeli military comes in, and it's not like any judgment is rendered. It's not about who's right, who's wrong. It's just a matter of being reminded of the humanity, the toll that human beings have taken as a consequence of the political decisions that were made on both sides.
But as Harry of the 60s versus Harry of today, confronting all the youngsters in the universities today, how would you?
And he was like them back then. Right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yes, well, I've thought about that a lot, actually, because the wonderful thing about youth is I can't say our any longer, but youth's ignorance and innocence, because they'll be impassioned about core moral values that they'll be willing to put their life on the line to see supported in the world around them. And I believe it's a reminder for everybody else, what's at stake. Whereas as you get older, you see nuances in a way that color the action that you might take. And you see, for example, in the case of the university, as a senator for the university at NYU, how hard the administration, the president of the university, and all of the people in her offices are struggling to deal with, in a rightful moral way, um, uh, respond to the students' demands and the faculty's demands and the Board of Trustees' demands and the federal government's demands. And I can tell you one thing, I know a couple of the administrators to be extraordinarily caring, moral, open-minded people. And I know that no matter what action anyone takes, there's going to be somebody that's going to be finding fault with the action. It's not, you can't please all the people all of the time, you know.
But do you speak to the students?
I speak to individual students. I don't speak to masses of students. I speak to the students in my classes, and I certainly speak to faculty, colleagues about these issues. And you know, as an anecdote, I have one of my students who is the writer of a big production, senior production, is Palestinian, and I selected her to go into one of these two major 30-minute productions because, and this is way back in April a year ago, because she just wanted to tell a lighthearted story that we're focusing on Palestinians in Dearborn, Michigan, to transcend the stereotypes that generally Palestinians were portrayed as in the media. And I supported her efforts, and she has a wonderful sense of humor, and it was a dramedy. And she finished her script by the beginning of September, and then they plan to have a reading of the script and gather together an audience and a cast, an all-Palestinian cast. And as it turned out, the reading was October 9th.
Yeah.
And so the script reading, and this is where you gather around a table and people play different roles, and there's an audience to see how the dialogue, the script reads, right? And here I was watching, and the director of photography was Jewish. I'm Jewish. There were other people that were there, you know, from different ethnicities, and we were all unified in laughter and joy in hearing something wonderfully imaginatively written that just happened to have a Palestinian cast and a Palestinian audience, right? And you realize the power of art to transcend the moment and put things into perspective, to say we actually can create things together that are of great beauty. And so that was an important reminder after everything that had unfolded a couple of days before.
Wonderful story.
Do they know about your young experience?
No, no. But I know that based on my experience and the forces that shaped me, that, for example, when this student had finished her rough cut of her film and we showed it in class, I was able to share with the class this story that I just relayed to you, to remind them of the power of art. And they've chosen to go into the field of communication and what the opportunity, this was a perfect example of the opportunities, if they chose something of substance, something within themselves that was meaningful, that they wished to explore in whatever kind of genre or story that they were telling.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I did talk with my classes, actually quite a bit, but in one class, screenwriting class, one of them asked, I don't think we want to discuss it in class. The other one came with a kafia to class, you know, the kafia, and I asked her, oh, you're going to demonstration? And she said, no, I just came from one. And a third one was sitting there and quietly say genocide. So, you know.
So how did you handle that moment?
Well, I told them all the time, a few times, almost every class, you're entitled to your views, any view, as long as you know what you're talking about. That's fine. And that's the only thing. And of course, you know, that's my take on it. They can say everything, but there is a red line. some of what they shout and, show their ignorance or hatred.
But the one who said it not in class, he wanted to speak with you after
No,
class?
no. She looked completely a detached person. And the other one who came with the kafia, I even think of bringing to I told Tzili, to maybe bring two students and just chat with them in this program. But are you worried? Are you worried about what's happening on campuses now?
I'm terribly worried, only because I went out one night last week actually, and right across from my apartment was the encampment, and it happened to be the night where there were hundreds. It was May Day, May 1st, so there were hundreds of students that were there, and some students from CUNY that were marching in solidarity with our students, and the police lined up along the street. And I was going to the opera, and I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to the opera when here's where the nucleus is of things that are going on, unfolding." But I was supposed to meet some people there, and I paid a good deal of money for the opera ticket, so I went. And I get off at Columbus Circle to go to the Met, and it's right under Trump Towers. And Trump Towers was barricaded. And I'm sitting there saying, this is America. You've got the demonstrators over here. You've got the political issues with Trump, a different kind of political issues that are unfolding with Trump over here. And we are in such a divisive space. And I listened to the faculty who were trying to process how to respond and who wished to speak in solidarity with the students and chastise the administration for their actions. And I listened to I'd witnessed other faculty who felt that the administration hadn't acted quickly enough, and everybody was pointing fingers at one another. And it's an extension of this climate that we're all in of that's divisive and accusatory. And I was finding myself shaped by my own youth, saying, wait a second, I lived long enough to know we're not going to resolve anything if we're blaming people. If we're pointing fingers and creating an us versus them, that's not going to remedy anything. It's only going to fuel the camps division and the separation into camps. And so I've been personally campaigning and writing to people to say, wait a second, we're educators. This is a learning moment for all of us.
Right.
We've got to bring people together to have a conversation and say, hey, students, divestment of investments in Israel is not as clear cut as it was in the 1960s when we wanted to divest any investment in Dow Chemical, which was a standalone corporate entity that was creating chemicals that was destroying humanity in Vietnam. Right now, there's mutual funds where every university has their endowments invested in complex investment instruments that you'd have to pull everything apart in order to find, okay, well, is it soap that's distributed and sold in Israel that you want to stop being sold there, or is it purely armaments? And all of these steps that become very, very complicated. And to begin that process, it's at the expense of being able to fund scholarships to ensure that many students will be able to continue to get an education who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it. So there's these nuances, once again, and you can have these conversations, and then let's boil it down to what are we talking about? Do we want to just stop the US from funding offensive weapons and maybe providing for defensive weapons? Is it that we're trying to arrange for a statement from the university encouraging the administration to create a ceasefire, a lasting ceasefire? What is it that would make everybody happy and hear from both sides what it is that needs to be addressed and what actions can be taken?
Yeah, but also, I wish these students will join together with everybody, that let's assume that this will be over, there will be a ceasefire. I hope the hostages will be back. Then how can we help the people from Gaza, that even nobody ever cared for them? I mean, they are in this situation not because Israel forced it on them, it's because that's until now the interest of the Hamas. So we have to move Hamas and get good people like those students and other forces to come and see how can we build there a place where people will have hope.
But before that, when you go, the truth is that the universities are the right hub, for these young people to protest and scream and do and, use all their forces to.
But they will be our leaders soon.
But the question is how the system is handling it so they can direct it to the right direction and get the right thing from that. And I think over there, it gets complicated because it's one versus another and it's not clean and it's much more complicated.
Right.
So I don't know, you need time between being a student and then realize things and then grow up and then use it.
Yeah, but meanwhile, it's doing a great damage.
The handling, I think, is wrong. The way they took care of it from the beginning made it more complicated.
They didn't know that it will explode.
They whom? They, the universities, you're saying?
Universities.
I was with the president of NYU second week maybe of the war. No, when we went, the first week of the demonstration started. And, they were trying really to find an answer, but I didn't feel they even envisioned this explosion all over the country.
Right.
And the violence. And apparently, has to be checked and proven, outside forces, coming into those students' demonstrations, protest. And so I actually witnessed the very honest, genuine attempt to understand what to do. And it was...
You're saying that you witnessed a genuine attempt to try to figure out what to do? Yeah.
Yes, there was, and I also, of course, witnessed the Jewish students who felt really harassed. I don't know how many, I never felt, not as an Israeli, not as a Jew, I never felt any harassment since I came to the States when I was 22 to do my PhD, and I never felt. But anyway, can I take you a bit for something else? Because you're raising the future filmmakers of this country and television and showrunners, and what world are in the industry in terms of how they're going to find their voice in this chaotic. But there are a lot of changes also in the industry, which if you can somehow unfold it a little bit.
Oof.
I just want to add to this.
If I could, I'd be running a major studio right now.
More important what you do.
I actually think so too.
Yeah.
Well, apropos of that, we'll talk about the changes in the industry, but you're asking about how to help students. You asked a couple of questions, how to help students find their own voice, and particularly in these times. And then the issue of the business is a separate one. They're related, but they're separate. The idea of students you help one at a time. You're not going to help everybody, I've found, as much as I would like to. There'll be those who are open to what it is that you have to say, and many that aren't. They're on their own paths. But even changing one, raising the awareness of one person, we have accomplished something. I go home at the end of a semester and say, okay, I see that person grew. And when there are events like those erupting in the world around us, like I was saying, those are learning moments. There's uh, uh, another Palestinian student that I have, and he was talking to me about he got called away for a family emergency and when he missed a class, a critical class, and I was totally supportive of him, but he was saying that his family uh, lives in Gaza and they'd lost 100 family members and friends, and the family was trying to determine how best to cope with it. Um, and
And he knows
that
you're Jewish?
no, he's Palestinian.
No, he
No,
knows that
they know
you
you're
are,
Jewish?
they know
Yeah,
you are Jewish?
yeah, yes. And because I've said that to our class, my classes, and that's a moment of real human connection, irrespective of me being however many years older than him and me being his professor. It's sort of like man to man. There's a moment of real human contact, and that probably had more weight or impact than anything else during the course of the semester. Same thing when I had my conversations with the young woman I was referencing, Palestinian woman, um, uh, uh, because one of the things that these students, in all of their passion, want, as I hear from them, is just to be heard,
Right.
just acknowledged, And so, for example, one of the things I took issue with in the president's communication with the faculty, I actually didn't, but this young woman brought it to my attention, and I felt I agreed with her. It was all about the administrative decisions that led to calling in the police on Gould Plaza. And there wasn't a mention to the fact that, wait a second, these are troubled times. We know, we hear you, you're in pain, and this conflict in Gaza is horrifying for the Palestinians and for the Israelites, Israelis. Um, um, then they would have felt as if they were heard,
Yes.
as opposed to the shift that took,
Sorry.
moving from what was a genuine cause that they were impassioned about, and then something that became about freedom of speech and uh, administrative responsibilities that had nothing to do with the war in the Middle East, So acknowledging their pain, their
Right.
their passion,
Absolutely.
and then that's where it gets to be a good a moment of connection and
Right.
elevates them.
But-
But
yeah.
in terms of the industry is going through tremendous changes as a consequence of COVID, as a consequence of the digital revolution, as a consequence of the consolidation in the industry, and where big tech companies have acquired the studios, and there's fewer pathways towards material getting exhibited. And so there's fewer projects that are being funded, and the industry has always been cyclical. This is the cycle that we're in today. As to whether or not, how long that lasts, from the people that I've been speaking with, nobody knows. But it's going to be a hard world for the students to enter once they graduate. And so my counsel to them is to keep creating, because eventually this is going to shift and opportunities are going to present themselves, and you should have a couple of screenplays in your back pocket that you're ready to deliver once there's somebody to deliver it to, and not to lose heart. And if you're going to be in this business, you got to learn to persevere anyhow, and also take advantage of social media, because there's whole industries, not just with influencers on social media, but content providers, where you can do short films and actually make a livelihood by
Right.
doing so,
Yeah.
and you get a chance to refine your craft while also making a couple of bucks, and bringing your creative team, giving them an opportunity to work together and get better and better. And so once you've shown that you can gather some eyeballs on the internet, on some of the various outlets that
Maybe
are there.
funded, right?
But there's a big difference. Today I was looking at all the list of the film theaters that were left in New York because so many are shut down. And there's nothing much to see. And also they play it once in a day or twice in a day, unless it's a blockbuster.
Because you're not the audience of today.
Hold on. So basically, all of us who used to be the audiences for the theaters, we got screwed up. And all the youngsters, they don't really go to theaters because they watch it on the
But they go to the
whatever it's called.
blockbuster.
They go to the blockbusters and they go to the internet to see. They have all their ways. So we're in between now. Where is it going? What are we going to left with? What are they going to enter to? It's like, how don't we lose this beautiful feeling of watching a film in the theater and have a good one?
Well, you have to understand, there's a whole generation now growing up that doesn't go to the movie theater, right? But they will go to see Dune too, because they know that that's a big movie that should be seen at IMAX or some sort of big experience. They're so savvy about, they're communicating with one another online, and if they see, it's not like us reading in the paper and seeing an ad. Oh yeah, there's my favorite.
New York Times, right?
Let's go see what movie she's in that's just come out, which was the case for me growing up, or there was a great concept in a plethora of options available to us, right? Now they are all communicating with one another. They go to these various sites where there's reviews and whether or not it's Reddit or whether or not it's Instagram or whatever their social media of choice might be. And then they realize this is one I can see on the TV screen or my computer, and this is one I gotta see in a big screen. So listen, change happens. It's tough for all of us to adapt.
But our students are anxious.
And by the way,
with good reason.
And that will be a filter, that will winnow out those who find for themselves that, they don't want to live with that sort of an uncertainty.
Right.
And that's an important educational.
Yeah, but I tell them, once you're a storyteller, you can go anywhere. You can be a doctor, you can be every profession needs storytellers, and you are all storytellers.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So add to it the AI. Add to this.
Yes, well, I'll tell you, I had a speaker come to one of my classes who's a dear friend, and he was president of the Writers Guild and one of the chief negotiators for the writers during this recent strike. And Chris was talking about a multitude of aspects of the film and television industry. And for maybe 50 minutes. And then in the last 5 minutes, we touched on AI in our conversation and then said goodbye. And the class, afterwards, as they were reflecting on this wonderful presentation he'd provided, all they wanted to do was talk about AI. And many of them were feeling a great deal of anxiety, thinking that AI was going to take their job opportunities away, and so that just like what was it, climate anxiety? There's AI and anxiety. I mean, anxiety seems to be the
major
the major force that we're all dealing
with.
But AI is, as I said to the student, is a tool, just like television was terrifying when it first came. There were going to be no more movies, or when the DVDs came, there were going to be, no more movies. When any kind of digital technology came in, oh my God, there's going to be no more film. Um, uh, Things are going to continue to evolve. AI is not going to take everybody's job. There'll be some that will, and then, like with everything else, there'll be a new job positions that will open up as a consequence of it, like executive prompters. How do you prompt AI to get what it is that you want, or whatever?
You just need to use it well.
I'm sorry?
You just need to learn it and to use it well.
Exactly. And not to be frightened by it, but to be able to be on the forefront of it, acknowledge it, embrace it, see how you use it well, and how it might serve you in your own path, whatever aspect of filmmaking that you're in.
So what is the most important thing for you
I think
for this? What do you want your students to come out from your classes? What's really important for you that they will come with what thing that they can carry for life from you?
so. My whole thing is, film is a medium, and it's a medium through which we express ourselves and evolve as human beings. And as we learn the tools of filmmaking, how to write, produce, direct, what have you, the same principles apply as you write, produce, and direct your lives. And so I want them to understand that it's not about what gets up on the screen. It's a matter of how you engage with the people that are working with you. That is the most important medium part of the process. And so if you can learn from your mistakes, and you're going to benefit and grow as a person, and that's what the journey of a lifetime offers. And if you can learn to communicate effectively, and treat people with respect and kindness, then no matter what path you choose in life, you're going to have a more successful means of accomplishing it.
Are you preparing them somehow for disappointments? I mean, trying, it's very difficult to get a green light. I mean, to get a financing, right, of a film.
It's incredibly difficult, and sometimes I do talk about that, but my particular focus is in preparing them for the craft and how to tell a good story, and knowing, like you said a second ago, storytelling is a essential aspect of every industry.
Everything.
And so if they learn how to tell a good story, they're going to do extremely well, regardless of whether or not they end up being Christopher Nolan or Greta Gerwig. They may be head of their own company, handling corporate communications, or create their own social media app. Who knows? But I don't want to depress them at this point. I mean, I do, because it's when you don't know anything that you're capable of creating anything. You know what I mean? As soon as you start knowing, oh, wait a second, it's so difficult, then I'm going to start censoring myself. Oh, this is the kind of stories that the industry is talking about. Oh, then I'm going to get away from my own individual instincts and voice. Throughout history, the greatest accomplishments in science, literature, arts, what have you, were people in their 20s, because they didn't know the rules, and then the rest of a lifetime is trying to either hang on to or recapture that sense of spontaneity, unfiltered creative instincts. So that's why I want to support their ignorance.
You know, once when I was in art school, one of my teachers taught us about an old artist who died very young at 18 or 20, and he said, and he saved us from all his roads to keep
Wow.
looking for a new way. That he just came through brilliant, and it was unbelievable. And then he died, and he said, what a saver. You know, it was like, it was so
Very
funny.
good education.
Yeah.
So who inspired you before we go?
Henry Miller
Ah,
was one inspiration. He was my mentor when I was a young man. Ended
Oh,
up creating
you knew him.
yeah. And because he was somebody who throughout his life didn't abide by any rules and was always finding his creative voice. You know, he was an original. Um, uh, and then, you know, people like Stanley Kubrick or for his thought-provoking explorations of human nature in grand and relentless pursuit of details. God is in the details, you know, and Frank Capra for his sense of humanity, you know, that he was able to capture, and hope, which we need desperately.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Harry,
Yeah.
you need to go.
You need to go, and you
I
open
do.
doors to quite a few, you open quite a few doors for us.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. I just love talking to you too, and my heart goes out to you. I know
Yeah.
the connections that you have, and it's a really challenging time for
We are
all of us.
very upset, but you know what happened to us, what happens now in Gaza. We are very upset.
Well, God be willing, there'll be some insight. Did you guys happen to see Robert Friedman,
Yeah, Tom Friedman.
Tom Friedman's article in the
I
paper on
read all
Sunday?
of this. Yeah, I always
I
read.
think that Rafah to Riyadh was illuminating, and I
Right.
pray that that's actually true. I have every reason to believe that that it is, and that someone somehow will get to Netanyahu and get him to go to Riyadh instead of to Rafah.
He will lose his base. Okay. On this happy note,
Bye.
thank
Bye.
you
Thank
for
you.
coming. Thank you
Bye.
for coming. Bye, everybody.